What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Binge Empire and our coverage of Amazon Prime's The Wheel of Time. So if you're on YouTube, you're seeing this early that there are four of us. We have a complete quartet. So Paul, our other show-only watcher, has joined us for this episode. He will be with us for the rest of the season. Hopefully, this is our coverage of episode 3, Seeds of Shadow. And I think before we get Paul on his little spotlight, because he can give us a little overall take, episodes 1 and 2, just the classic Bingetown housekeeping being, if this is your first time listening to us, which it might be because you might have binged all 3 episodes and then skipped episode 1 and 2 podcast coverage, went right into 3. Just a reminder that we will be covering the episode in kind of these story buckets. So we'll talk about the Forsaken Party, the little tea party that they have, which was our cold open. We'll talk about the Two Rivers, all of those scenes. Then we'll move to setting, Tarvalon, the Io Waste. So we're going to bucket things together. We're not going to hit everything. We can get talkative. We're going to try not to get talkative, but just stick with us. I'm sure you'll have a blast alongside of us. And with all of that, Paul, how about you give us some opening season takes?
It feels incredible to be back with this show. Even just being back with this group, talking theories and Wheel of Time again. It's so fun. I love being here. Episode 1 was an absolute whirlwind of entertainment. Like the opening scene was just peak, and then the rest was also insane. We were getting just constant dopamine injections like every scene. And then, by the time the second episode is playing and we're like 40 minutes in and I'm like, no one's been stabbed yet. Like, what's with the pacing now? Like right by now there was at least like 10 people stabbed in episode 1, but really they were both incredible. Way too much to single down one instance on episode 1, but the opening scene of the throne room comes to mind. It feels like that's just a little glimpse of what this show can be, and it can build towards just the absolute power and insane feats that can happen. And then, episode 2, Queen Morghese, she was just a wild introduction. It didn't feel more like Game of Thrones than that flashback scene of Queen Morghese taking the throne. That was incredible. I wasn't expecting it, so now it's at least on my radar for how brutal this really can be. But really no complaints. I think everything has just been insane. It's so good to be back with the crew. Like it's fantasy heaven right now. I'm absolutely so happy.
Has Matt been getting some laughs out of you?
Oh my God, he's insane. I cannot wait to gush over him this episode, especially.
Dude, Matt is coming into his own. And my last question before we can start moving on to the actual episode, though, what did you think of Rand with the long hair?
My God, scene was insane. Rand with the long hair. I don't know. Maybe if you straighten it out, look a little more goth, maybe that would work for him better. But that was insane to see. And if that's a glimpse into the future, I don't know. That's a whole other conversation. But I'm terrified and excited at the same time. Yeah.
All right. And that actually is a good reminder for me to maybe introduce the rest of us as well, because if you're joining us for the first time, we're just throwing names and such at you. I'm Kyle. My role here is pretty much the book reader, subject matter expert-ish, although it is funny now that we're recording this on Thursday night, so a lot of people have watched the episodes already, and it's so funny reading people who are much smarter and more in depth with the lore than me catch things, and I'm like, I literally forgot that completely. So that is the perfect plug for me to say the best way to interact. Make a comment on YouTube. You can join our Discord rather. If you want to tweet at us, just don't be mean about it. Okay, I'm sensitive, so just constructive criticism about things we might have missed is always the best way to go about that. Luke, who is the other book reader here as well, is going to help me out with all of those things and kind of keep us chugging along. And then Dave, who has completely abandoned his title as Land's son. I think he might be frustrated with Land at this point because Luke's still rocking Lanfear's son. He is our other show only. So Paul and Dave will be our guinea pigs of entertainment and excitement and predictions and theories, while Luke and I will try to keep the rails on the podcast. Okay, So the first scene we're going to cover here is immediately going off the rails. What an unbelievable end of episode 2 into the start of episode 3. Dave, I mean, claps all around. You can have the floor here. Dave ended episode 2 saying that Gabriel was so suspicious to him. He was thinking Forsaken, Dark Friend, and then what a turnaround. Immediately vindication.
I will take my victory lap, but I have to admit, when Luke and I were watching originally, the scene was very dark for me. And we're getting introduced to the Forsaken, and I am understanding that it's the Forsaken, but it took me way too long to process that it was Gabriel. Luke looks at me and he's like, "Did you understand the conversation?" I was like, "Yeah." Like, I read him back the exact lines that they had. And he's like, "Do you know who that is?" I'm like, "No." And he's like, "It's Gabriel." And I'm like, "No fucking way."
No, it did not go down like that. He wasn't reacting the way I assumed he would, especially for nailing that within 2 seconds of last episode. So it was more about, I wasn't giving him the water. I was trying to take the horse to water. I was like, so read that line back. Okay, what's that mean? And then he like clicked, is that Gabriel? And I was like, yes, dude. It was hard to see, but it's because of the screeners. But at the same time, you did nail that. So you get credit, even though we had to watch it twice back. That scene, we watched it, then we restarted the scene and watched it again right away. So
what an amazing scene. I mean, we get 2 more additions to the Forsaken here, and what an introduction they were to these characters. I think their names were Samael and Ravin, if I'm pronouncing those correctly. And this was great. I mean, the few takeaways that I have here is that it took Luke and I a little bit of a discussion to figure out this, but I believe that Ravin was deemed to be the weakest of the Forsaken when Lanfear is looking at Ravin. I think is he the one with the scars on his face? That's not Gabriel, right? Okay, yeah, so Samael is the weakest then, because Lanfear was kind of looking at him when she was explaining that Mogideon will come for you first. So that was a great introduction, and we know at the end of this scene some crazy things happen as well with Samael and Mogideon, but yeah, I'll pat myself on the back for that one.
Ravin and Mogideon at the end, but we'll get there eventually.
My notes are screwing me right now. Yes,
you're good.
Ravin.
You're good. We'll get there eventually. Now, Paul, they explain here in this scene that Gabriel is using compulsion. So something that was kind of mentioned a little bit in season 2 with kind of Varen returning to the tower and finding out where Elaine and them went. They introduced the idea of compulsion, but did you notice in episode 2 of this season when Gabriel is introduced in the hall that Lyanna Sedai, who's the keeper of the Chronicle, Swan's kind of left-hand woman, forgets his name. She doesn't remember who he is. Dave was immediately on that, and I'm just kind of curious if you had any thoughts about that.
No, so he was definitely suspicious because of it was that one line where he says, I'm sorry, Elaine says, long may he reign. I'm sorry, I messed that whole thing up. Let me just start over. I was so entranced about everything that was going on while I was watching those episodes that I took a note of it, but then I never thought about it and never really picked it back up when she just blanks for a second. It was so out of place. But what I did flag about Gabriel was when he's talking to Elaine and she says, something along the lines of the queen consort, and then he responds with long may he reign. And that was just a weird response. And then it kind of got vindicated in the previously on this episode. They showed that. And I was like, well, now that's in the front of my mind. So, but even with all that, I did not know for certain that this was Gabriel. Like, I literally wrote down, like, is this him? And then they called him Ravin. And I was like, oh, so it's not him. So, so it was like, it felt like season 2, episode 2, when they do the Dark One reveal, and you guys blew my mind on here that the Dark One isn't Ishii. Something along the lines just happened like 2 minutes ago when you revealed that it's Gabriel. It was like, all right, so vindication a little bit, but I was not confirmed going in at all. So that is hysterical, but just absolutely terrifying, this whole scene. Like, I want to know so much more about these people.
Yeah, this scene was like crack to me, where I just can't get enough. I was so down to watch it just back to back after we saw it the first time, and I love every part about the inner politics of the different Forsaken. They all have their own motivations. They all are of the dark side, but like they're all so uniquely different. And now that the show made the decision to cut down the number of Forsaken to 8, they're going to be some combined Forsaken from the books, but it's going to add more depth because we're going to get more screen time with each of them separately. And what we got here is we have now the names of 7 of the 8 that are existing in this version of Wheel of Time. Just to recap, what we get here is it's Lanfear, Samael, and then Ravin, who's Gabriel. So those are the 3 that are physically there with Mogideon watching. And then they name drop Semirog and Grendel. And then, of course, Ishmael died last season. There's a 8th one that is not named. They don't talk about whoever the 8th one is. That's actually still up for grabs of who it's going to be. And that's like one of the funnest things to explore on Twitter of time, of people in the know of who they think it's going to be. But that aside, there's some incredibly important things that are just casually said in this scene that we have to kind of talk about here. And Kyle, you clean up my mess because I'm probably not going to explain this perfectly. But one of the things that gets talked about is the idea of the Nameless. Okay, is the Nameless. And Lanfear, and she kind of lays out the term and says, talking about Mogideon, who wants to climb the ranks of the Forsaken, will do anything to get to the top and become the Nameless. And then later on, Samael says, well, if you're the strongest and you're the one that Mogideon fears, why aren't you already Nameless? And Nameless is just meant to be the leader of the Forsaken, or at least the highest favored general of the Dark One himself. So they're all kind of always vying to see who's on top because there's always a hierarchy in the books, and I'm sure we'll get the same thing in the show. So there is like a level of who's the strongest, who's the most in the shadows, who cares about getting the most power, who cares about getting the most favor of the Dark One. All this is going on, and right here we just have that conversation about it. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get into any spoilers. But the one thing that was pretty interesting was that I'm pretty sure when Lanfear's questioned about why aren't you Nameless yet, I think she says something like maybe the Dark One still wants Ishi to be it or something like that. So I mean, I'm curious of your new guys, what's your take on that, and the Nameless as a title in general.
So I was getting the general vibes of what you just explained. I didn't know that you could like fight for it and just like whoever's in his highest favor becomes it. But I almost assumed that Nameless was like the title of, you know, like right hand man, assuming Ishi was the Nameless last go around. But that's I don't know. That was just an assumption. And then when Lanfear responds with maybe he wants Ishmael like still, I was like, is Ishi still alive then? Like, is he still in play? And I mean, that's what I took from that is I was under the assumption that he was dead with the, you know, getting stabbed with the heron blade. But that comment alone makes me think maybe there's a way to revive him somehow. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I took it as 2 ways. One, that yes, Ishi can be revived, but I don't know if they're going to go that route because it felt like when Ishi got stabbed in the end of season 2, you know, he was looking around and he couldn't see anything. I think was his quote, or what can you see? Nothing. And it seemed like he was at peace with that, and he accomplished his goal of, you know, wanting to be cut free of the weave. So my second place that I went to with that comment was maybe the Dark One somehow doesn't know that Ishmael's completely dead yet and hasn't received news, which would still be shocking to me. But those are the 2 ways that I took it. I honestly wish we had some subtitles here because there was a line too from Robin that kind of went over my head. I'm getting the general vibe of the sentence, but he basically says, we did not learn from last time. We chosen are more for each other than the dragon is what I heard. But I took it as they are supposed to be working with each other rather than the dragon, but I couldn't hear it fully with the subtitles, without subtitles.
So you got the words. I think that line specifically speaks to one of the main themes of this scene, and also a conversation that we had in season 2 during our coverage of if the dark side was aligned together, the light would be fucked. You know, like
Right.
if season 2 of Lanfear and Ishmael were working together, like they would stand no chance. Add Mogideon, they would stand no chance. Now we're adding Ravin, we're adding Samael, they would have no chance. We're adding Grandel, we're adding Semirhage. If they were all aligned on their goals, our heroes would stand absolutely no chance.
Right.
And the reason why they're not really working together so much. They have their own personalities. They all kind of got recruited to the dark for their own reasons. They all have these, let's say, detrimental aspects of their personality that kind of don't align well with teamwork and collaboration. That's not on their resumes. But a big part of that is the Nameless. They're competing. I think the Dark One at some level likes the competition. He likes this competition between all of his strongest generals, because on some level he probably thinks, or she probably thinks, that it's pulling the best out of them. So I think they did a good job in this scene, and will help them, I guess, having this conversation of establishing that's kind of the vibe between all of these people here.
And the last thing before we get into Mo Gideon, I'll say is I'm correct in assuming that Lanfear is the strongest out of all of them. The way that she implies that she would be taken out last and she was the top of the food chain, let's say, that implies that she is physically the strongest with the one power, I guess, or maybe just in 1-to-1 combat, if they were just dropped in, she would probably take them all out without any planning.
It did seem like they implied that. I'm sure I could Google the exact, because there is technically a quantitative power system in the world that I think is a little wonky and people don't really love or use that often, but I can probably get that answer for you. That is, I think, the feel they were trying to give you.
All right.
Yeah, so this was weird because Robin was talking about we spend so much time fighting each other instead of the dragon, but then, like, it's also weird because is he playing games? Because at the end when Mo Gideon comes in, like, I also don't know their background. They seem to be working together, but like the way that he placed his hand on her face, I was like, is he somehow able to use his compulsion on her as well? And I don't know, because she's very cunning, Mo Gideon. So maybe she's like playing him, and but it's just interesting that the whole concept of, yeah, we're on the same team, but we want to like kill each other and we hate each other is so wild and so fun.
The nuance of that is so fun, man. That's why, like, Paul, I know you specifically, you're not afraid to try a long fantasy series. Like, that's one of the things you'll latch onto, just like pretty much everybody else. The Forsaken are so damn fun, and it's almost like the less you get, as long as it's word for word powerful, like each scene, each line of dialogue, like that's what you want. You don't want too much of them, but you also need them every once in a while to really spice everything up. And yeah, like Mogideon you said Mogideon, is that how they say it in the show? I'm assuming that's why.
I remember I'm literally listening to our season 2 coverage and we flip flop, but I'm pretty sure they say Mogideon. Yeah,
I think they say Mogideon as well, but I'm not 100% on that.
Moggy. If we could do Ishi, we can do Moggy. Is that what they?
I'll do
say?
Mog, Lord of Blood.
yeah.
But either way, two other things I just want to throw out there that I thought incredible was, we actually talked about it last podcast. They kind of confirmed here what Loyal was saying about the traveling by channeling. I think this is the first time we got to see teleporting straight up like this. So just know, like, at the highest level of power, like, you can do this. You can just straight up teleport. So that was really cool. And then also, just again, shout out to Robin for, it's cooler in the books because it's such a later reveal that he is a Forsaken, Gabriel, that is, but the compulsion and the idea that he not just convinced them that he's in their life, he built a 10-year past with all of them. And that's like one of the coolest ideas of how strong he is with the compulsion power. He's only been out for a couple months since Ishi broke the seals, and they think they have all these memories. Like, Elaine's like, oh, like, I wish we can go back to drinking again, like the old days. That's just really cool to me. And that's like Robin's specialty. Yeah.
It was like why I was so confused because I couldn't put any of that together.
That was the first time Elaine had ever met him.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Ever.
Yeah. Like,
yeah. Compulsion's a hell of a drug, dude.
Yeah.
And real quickly, just got to mention Samael mimicking Lanfear going, oh, Randall Thor. Ridiculous.
I think that low-key might be my favorite moment of the whole episode. I thought that was so funny. I think Samael's characterization is hilarious. And to answer the power scaling of the Forsaken, this is why I was hesitant to say it. I wanted the confirmation of it. So in the books, the male ceiling of power in the one power is way higher than women. So like the weakest male Forsaken is like 2 levels higher than the strongest female Forsaken. So all of the male Forsaken are stronger than Lanfear ends up being the strongest female Forsaken. So that's the way it is in the books. the way that the adaptation has gone in the show, I could see them changing that up for sure and making them all kind of more on their own individual spectrum together, and where, you know, the men and the women can kind of jump and be in different spots.
Mhm.
So yeah, that, I mean, Robin is very strong though, and the compulsion part of that is very important as well. And the last comment I'll make before we dip up out of here is that I believe Samael says the Dark One isn't speaking to you to land
Yes.
fear.
Mhm.
So that's something that they made note of. Feels like something we should make note of.
I'll also just say Moog and Robin feel like a relationship. I know Paul had the idea that he's using compulsion there. I took it as relationship, and maybe they're just banging on the side a little bit.
Mhm.
Would be interesting. It's a power couple, I guess you could say.
The show version of Moog is already surpassed the book version in my head as like a cool character, and the way that she's presented, the way they talk about her, she's already up there in terms of interests.
So do we like, probably this conversation would happen when we talk about Tenshiko a little more, but since we're talking about it now, do we like the softly from the shadows, or do we like Patton Fane's whistle?
Softly,
Patton
softly
Fane's
from the
whistle.
shadows. Oh no,
that was
disagree.
like, yeah, that's so funny. The same amount of conviction, but completely opposite takes. Okay.
Oh, she's so
This was
good.
also the first episode we get our title sequence. We haven't had it with all the weaves and things like that. It just looks great, so we'll give it the shout out. Okay. The first setting we're going to jump into here is the Two Rivers. Again, this is another setup episode, somewhat similar to last episode. We're kind of getting a lay of the land here. I think the first conversation / scenes we'll isolate to give some takes on, if we want, is going to be Perrin and Alana just having this grief discussion in the Ibarra family burial ground. There's just a lot of good lines here. It's some good characterization. They're developing a little bit of a relationship, so just wanted to give people the chance to talk about this if they wanted to.
Good to see Perrin moving on. I mean, I know he'll obviously never fully move on from his wife and that sad, tragic ending that they had, but to me, it felt like he was airing everything out. I feel like this is now going to be officially the past for him now, and he can look forward to what's to come in his future. I thought this was a really nice scene for Perrin going forward in his character.
Yeah, I'm curious if he would have buried the ring if it didn't break off with the axe,
True.
earlier on. But yeah, what you guys said, it's just interesting to get this like emotional side because we're used to like constant tragic things happening to them, and then we never really see like we get a lot in the beginning of them like coming to terms with it, but like this was a good break. And just also Alana talking about losing Ivan and like how the balance isn't there because it's 3 and not 2. That was I wasn't really expecting that at all. So it was a good light into how that water Aes Sedai bond kind of works.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think that's a really interesting point, Paul, about would he have buried the ring or not? Could this be maybe the wheel weaving in a certain way? And that is essentially a butterfly effect that sets Perrin's heart free a little bit.
That's what the wheel does.
Yes. Perrin does ask her too, like, are you going to find a new warder? I don't know if that's connected at all, but they're setting up something about there being a missing third with Alana and Maskim. We'll just see how that goes. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Something to talk about in between that is going to be the Cauthon family arrests. So when we get back to the Two Rivers in the Wine Spring Inn, we got some of our homies, our group. They're kind of roughhouse, and Bane and Chia just want to play Maiden's Kiss. Loyal's writing his book, but we get this information that the Cauthons, which is Matt's family, so it ends up being his mom, his 2 sisters, get arrested. And then we also can talk about the parallel scene at the White Cloak camp, which is Dave's boy Valda is back, Child Valda's back. We have Dane Bornhold, and we have the Cauthons who are arrested in the camp.
Don't you mean Child Talda?
Oh wow, yeah, sorry. It was right there.
That is so good. My God.
Yeah, fuck the White Cloaks. I honestly, again, issues with not having subtitles. It went over my head that this was Matt's mom and his sisters. I honestly didn't know that at the beginning. I just thought it was just some closer people to the Emmons Field 5 from whenever ago. Makes the stakes that much more high and makes me believe that Perrin's about to fuck shit up to get them out of there. And I hope We liked, what's his name? The white cloak that captured her.
Dane
Yes.
Bornhold. So he's the new
We-
Borny.
Yeah, we liked Dane from season 2. He seemed to have a good set of morals on him. He had a good head above his shoulders. But now this is kind of the turning point for him, obviously, losing your father, regardless of how much of an ass they may have been to the public. It's tough, and he's not taking it well. He's obviously using his anger and taking it out on these people, but setting up a nice showdown between him and Perrin.
I like Child Valda's line here of the land here must be so tainted to raise such poisonous fruit. He's just such a zealot. He's so like brainwashed. It's like so ridiculous. Like talking about Perrin, we just saw Perrin have this really nice conversation about grief and family and loss, and then it's like the poisonous fruit in this area.
That's one of the best things about Wheel of Time is there's so many different factions, but it's not just that. Is that within each faction there's factions and there's different mindsets. And one of my favorite things about White Cloaks and Bornhold specifically is Valda shows the juxtaposition right here. Like there are the psycho White Cloaks, and then there is Bornhold, who he thinks he's doing right, and he is. He's trying to get revenge for his dad dying in front of him. Like that is so valid. He could be the main character of his own story, and you would be on his side. But of course, we're looking at, you know, Emmon Field 5, like we're the side, so, you know, F off. But I do like Bornhold as a character, and I think they're doing a good job as painting him as nicer and like actually having a good moral compass compared to Valda.
I wanted to call out
fresh off
before. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
No, sorry. I was fresh off the season 2 finale, so everything with the Bornhold family and killing Hopper, that was fresh in my mind. Forgot how much of jerks they were, the producers of the show, showing a bleeding Hopper, like bleeding out, and how it just would not get off my screen. But what you said, Luke, like you almost root for him, right? Like I love Perrin, but like you completely understand where Dane is coming from. So it's like such a tough situation. But what's funny about this situation is I know Matt's mom is written differently in the books, and I think she has like more of a part in the beginning, and maybe even Nynaeve when she first goes in the arches, I think is like more to it. I could be wrong, but what we got from Matt's mom was just horrendousness in season 1. So don't really care for her, but you know, his sisters I'm worried about. But when she gave the line where she was like, I'll die before you touch them, Dane's sitting there probably like, yeah, like I know that's the plan. Like that was such a weird line, and Matt's mom just sits in a terrible light from how they painted her earlier on.
Fair.
That was a big complaint in season 1 from people of like, why do we have to make Matt's parents bad people? They're not bad people in the books.
Yeah.
And so like we as book readers knew this was coming. So I was kind of curious at the time of like, is that ever going to come back around and actually impact the story of will people who don't know better, let's say, for lack of a better term, feel a different type of way about this storyline? Clearly it's happening with you.
Oh, yeah.
And I will say though that you don't think you would say the same thing if you were captured with your daughters or son, that like you'd rather die than let Dane Bornhold touch them? That seemed like a fair line to me, to be honest.
No, I just think like Dane was thinking like, yeah, like we know that's probably going to happen. So I don't know.
Like keep it to yourself, lady.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Okay. You wanted to finish that cup of water. Okay. Before we move on to what's kind of the last part here, I do want to re-mention that Loyal is writing a book. It just seems very in character with him. I hope that we get that kind of throughout the story. It will be fun if we can check in on like how many chapters he's written. Will Loyal finish his book before George R.R. Martin finishes Winds of Winter? That seems to be the current competition that's going on. We shall see there. And then we'll talk about Fail a little more in probably this next conversation, but I just want to shout out and introduce the concept that, so we have Lord Luke, who is here. He's kind of helping the people of the Two Rivers, let's say, organize their defense and against the White Cloaks, their resistance to the White Cloaks and the Trollocs. And we have with him, we learn eventually as Fail, they are hunters of the Horn. So we learned in season 2 when Rand was in Kyrian, they called the hunt for the Horn of Valir. We saw the people getting their brands on their arm. we knew at some point they would come back into the story. So it's just nice world building. It's
Okay.
coming full circle that like we're meeting some of those people out in the world and they are now impacting our story.
Honestly forgot about that. I'm glad you brought that up because that definitely makes her character more interesting to me. I didn't see that connection.
Yeah, and
This-
Paul had mentioned at that point that he was thinking maybe that Mark could be like an activation or like an evil thing, which I thought it was a fantastic theory at the time, where they all just their eyes roll back in their head when they hear one word and they all start marching around.
Let
Brilliant.
me just say though that I was like mind blown and so happy with episode 2 with how many chess pieces they're introducing that are going to be characters in this story. I don't know how often they'll be appearing, but this episode did the same thing. Like, Forsaken aside that we met earlier, we're meeting Lord Luke, we're meeting Fael, and this is just, for me as a book reader, I just love seeing these type of character introductions because it just gets me by surprise every time. I should know, I should be expecting, but my God, Fael is so well casted in terms of physical features and how she looks. I am like, she might be the best one besides like, she might be the single best character based on her description, is if I'm remembering right, because she looks like she has like a falcon face. I don't know, she's smaller, she's just perfect. I think this actor is a perfect Fael.
She is like mesmerizing. I feel like I just want to get in a staring contest with her.
Mhm.
There's
She's
just
got, like,
something
a
about
pointy
her. She has a
features.
Yeah, she does a very magnetic look. I think she
Mhm.
really commands the screen on the screen for me. And the scenes, obviously, that's somewhat my bias from the books is involved in that. But I agree with you 100%. I was going to say the same thing eventually. Okay. So the next, I think we can have this an all-in-one conversation. It's a lot of scenes, but the gist of all these scenes is essentially Perrin is kind of stepping into this role of a leader because they literally won't let him turn himself in. Classic nice guy thing here. The other part of this is Maskim and Alana having a conversation about grief. I don't know if we want to talk about those two any deeper than that, but that's kind of the two big things going on here is Perrin kind of finding himself and then Maskim and Alana kind of finding themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah,
No one cares. Okay.
No, totally care. I'm just confused about like what's going on with Maxim. I think what it is though is he literally just wants to go hunt down and kill Leandrin, right? He just wants revenge for murdering Ivan, and Alana is more like focusing on the dragon and what's to come, and she's trying to like help out the tower. Is that the gist? Because they talk about how they got here, and to be honest, what did they say? Like after the battle, they were just chasing people, but then they said there was all these Trolloc injuries. Like I was a little lost here.
I think that's part of it, that she wants to she's pledged herself to the Aes Sedai, the White Tower, and she wants to do her duties to find the dragon. But he does vividly say, you feel nothing. So she is not impacted by Ivan's death at all, as if, and I got the sense that when she says, I think it's Maxim says, you don't feel anything because he's dead. How do you not feel anything? And she's like, that's why I don't feel anything. Like she's already moved on from it. She's not, to me, she doesn't seem emotional almost like it's, and so he is pissed at her for not feeling anything. And she's kind of mad at him because he is grieving too much. She is literally waking up in the middle of the night because she feels what he feels in the grief, when I think if they didn't have that connection, she wouldn't feel any grief or the smallest bit of grief versus what he's feeling.
I think that you're slightly misinterpreting it. I think that she is horribly sad about what's happening, but they're in a situation where they can't turn the bond off because they're in danger. So they need the bond on. And Maskim's emotions are just absolutely, I don't want to use the word assault because it sounds, but like just overwhelming her, where like she almost doesn't have room for her own emotions because he's so emotional that if she also took on his emotions on top of her own emotions, like she would be at 2,000. But if she can suppress her own emotions and just accept his, then she can get to like 1,000, 100, you know?
That makes
so,
sense.
and then on the flip side for him, it's like, you don't feel anything. He's mad at her for not feeling anything. So maybe he feels like he has to grieve doubly. So it's just like a mess of like, imagine me, us three, me, you, and Paul. We're all bonded, and then Paul died, and then you felt nothing, and I was feeling everything, and you were feeling what I was feeling, and then I knew that you felt nothing. I'd be like, yo, what the fuck's wrong with you? And then you'd be like, you got to chill out a little bit because I'm going crazy over here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's a good breakdown.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But moving on
So-
from that, I love this scene. Okay, do you have anything to add to that, Paul?
I was just gonna reiterate the question. I don't really understand how they got here. Like, from my understanding, like you said, Dave, Alana wants to do what's good for the tower. So were they just chasing the Dark Friends and it followed them here, or we don't know?
we don't know at this point. We know that
Okay.
we got the Perrin thing at last episode where there was a man and a woman's tracks out of the ways. We know that Alana and Maskim fought some Trollocs at some point. She
Okay.
hasn't really told him Maskim this is why they're there. Everything is a little bit mysterious at this point.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything, and they would always scene change and do that stuff. So, so that explains that. And then all I have to say for the village is, do you guys not remember Beltane? It's exactly what Perrin said. I was like, yeah, like, what are you guys talking about? Like, the Trollocs aren't a big deal. I was like, do you not remember when you all got massacred? So I don't understand that. I guess they're not able to continue on with their normal lives because they all have to huddle here together and like kind of hide from the White Cloaks and the Trollocs. But that was I was like, Perrin's making 100% sense here, guys. I don't know what you're trying to leave for.
Perrin crushed, and he felt like a bigger fantasy character here, where he's just, first of all, huge. He stands out. He almost feels like anime characters, like one of the main ensemble cast, like in the middle of a high school, like they got the colored hair. Like he just stood out in a good way, and like this is pure Perrin. Like he doesn't want to be a leader, but sometimes he's looked at to be a leader. He's really this just huge, lovable badass, and I think it just came across well that they responded well to him. And I just got to say, dude, I wanted to say this last podcast, Egwene's mom is a rider. I love her, man. She's just like for the squad. She'll protect them. She rallies for Perrin here. She's part of the reason the crowd rallies for him. So I hope we get more of her. But yeah, this is just, it's almost like a stepping stone to the next episode for whatever's going to go down with Perrin, because we're still kind of building for this storyline compared to others. But yeah, just Perrin's getting on track. And I know Kyle's loving every second.
Yeah, I think, Paul, you're supposed to be a little frustrated with the Two Rivers people and this area. They're just known for being stubborn. They're hard-headed. They don't really want to be told what to do. They want to just go back to their farms. They probably have some of them probably have a level of trust in the White Cloaks, and they're just like, whatever, like, let me go back to my farm. I need my animals and my crops. And that's why Perrin's like, you guys got to break out of this. Like, we have problems here.
And when they are talking about Perrin potentially being a leader, do they mean like an official title, like Lord of the Two Rivers kind of thing? Or is they're just saying we need someone to lead us out of this situation kind of deal?
It doesn't really say necessarily. I think it's probably more of like this general sense that he is becoming a leader of men in a way, almost reluctantly. With episode 1, he has that little conversation. Whoa, that sounded like a baby when I said those words. That little conversation. When he's saying to Rand, like, I believe in you, like you can lead whatever and live, and then Matt as well, like I would follow Matt. You would, like, he'll do well and all that stuff, but me, like, I'm no leader, like I'll just go back home. And him going back home is him unknowingly forcing himself kind of into this leadership role. That's the beauty of Wheel of Time. That's the beauty of The Wheel. That's the beauty of Taviran, which they've totally dropped that concept out of the show, which is one of my complaints, but I think we'll get back to it at some point.
It definitely reminds me of the quote that Swan was saying to Matt in the last episode, in terms of heroes don't try to be heroes. They just do what they think is right. And this is just a prime example of Perrin isn't trying to be a hero. He's just trying to do what he feels like he needs to do.
We're just simmering on the stove right now, baby. I'm waiting for that rolling boil in the Two Rivers, because that's how I get my kicks off. The last thing I'll say before I'm ready to move on, not going to force us to move on, but I want to address the Mandarb Fail thing. So this was a classic part of the books. I'm so glad they put it in here, where we meet Fail, and she is a hunter of the horn. So she adopts this hunter name, and she thinks it's all badass. She thought of it herself, and the first person she tells is Perrin, and she says Mandarb. and that's Lan's horse. So he starts laughing, and she's like, "Fuck you," basically. Like, you're gonna laugh at my name. And then eventually she breaks down her walls and tells him rather that her real name is Fail. Falcon, way cooler name, I think. I think Fail works way better, and that just was very glad that they put this in the
Another
show.
Witcher comparison. Wasn't Ciri's name also, isn't that stand for Falcon or something too? I might be totally off.
I'd have to double check, but
I just feel like that's
familiar.
another Witcher comparison we can throw in here.
Either
Paul,
way,
you
I'm
haven't
looking.
listened
Keep
to
an
our
eye on
episode 2
Fael.
coverage. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Say that again.
I was saying, just keep an eye on Fael. I'm really looking forward to seeing more out of her. Just like we said, Kyle, she seems like she's casted perfectly.
Yeah. And to give you context, Paul, for that Witcher comment, because you probably haven't listened to the episode 2 coverage yet, these two forgot what Calanthe's name was, but don't worry, I was there for them and supplied it.
She was the witch that gave Cersei her prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
She was.
Speaking of the season 2 coverage, why do we keep calling it 2 Rivers when we were calling it 4 Rivers back in season 2? We were calling it the White Castle. Yeah, the White Castle and the 4 Rivers. You're geniuses.
Funny.
Perfect segue into our next setting, which is the White Castle, Tarvalon. We're going to break this into 3 kind of buckets because they're hopping all over the place. A lot happened here. So we're going to talk about everything that happens with Elaida first. Then we'll move into Nynaeve and Elaine in their Black Aja hunt. We'll wrap up with Matt, which is, I'm sure, what Luke's dying to talk about at the end of this. So to start with Elaida, we get a little small opening scene that was a little odd and confusing, but essentially the big part here I'm want to talk about is Elaida tries to get an audience with the Amerlin seat, gets rejected, and then heads to the Red Sitters. So these are 2 seemingly small scenes, but I feel like they tell us a lot in these scenes. And I'm just kind of curious of what Dave and Paul, your takes were when you see kind of Elaida go up against Varen and Lyanna, get rejected, and then head back to those Red Sitters from episode 1.
I was kind of embarrassed because I was like, she's like knows the old rules. She doesn't know what's going on when she first gets rejected for the seat. So, and then as you watch, like, you're like, why are you explaining your whole plan to Min? And that's kind of jumping the gun. But in the end, you just you realize, like, she is just a schemer. Like, she is pretending to leave like breadcrumbs for like Varen and everybody else to follow, but really she's just leading them right into a trap. So I had high expectations for her. I don't necessarily like her. I don't see her, like, I see her more as a villain kind of because of what she has done and what she's talking about doing. Plus, the Red Sisters, they're never too friendly. You never like see one of them and think I want to hang out with them. So she's very, very interesting, and I'm nervous. Like, she could definitely be a key player. Just talking about, the towers and the sitters and everything involved in that, just to jump forward a little bit. I mean, she could work her way to the top super quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I said it last episode. She was left here to be a thorn in Swan's side, and that's exactly what she's doing here. She has to find a sitter, so who better to go to than the Red Aja sitter? And the whole scene where she explains to the what's the Red sister's name? That's the head.
Sutama.
She explains to Sutama that the Red Aja are kind of losing their way, and then there's the one that's next to Sutama. I can't pull up her name. What is that?
Galena
seems to be buying more into what Elaida is saying versus I already forget her name.
Just stop trying to bring up the names. Stop trying to do it.
But either way, she's just going behind everyone's back. She's trying to do what she wants to do, and it's scary. She's definitely a threatening character. As we said in the last episode, we know she was fighting for the Amelin seat against Swan, and she was the runner-up, so we know she is powerful and very capable. We also know that she still has people and connections in the tower that are willing to help her out. What I want to kind of dissect a little bit is later on, Sutama does get the request from Swan to go find the false dragon, and that was already pitched to Sutama from Elaida. Sutama brushes it off and says, no, I have more to worry about here than what you're trying to tell me to do. Then all of a sudden she is tasked with this. So my thought was that Elida somehow brought it into Swan's head that they need to go. And that's why Elida was very kind of grinning at the end there when she is leaving, because now Sutama's forced to leave. And now the person who has faith in her and Galena will now just basically be Elida's pawn going forward. So this was all part of her plan, is basically what I'm trying to say here.
I think that all happened with the meeting with Min. That was Elida kind of sinking her hook to do a little, swan fishing reference, because I always
Ooh.
love when she does those. That was like Elida like setting the hook, was telling Min like, oh, like we share this bond. I get foretellings. You can see. By the way, don't
and then-
tell anybody this.
Yes,
I know
okay.
you're here to
Yep.
spy on me, but don't tell. I'm going to tell you my plan. And it was, cage the dragon and all of that, which by doing that, the Amerlin seat hears that and was like, all right, that red sitter is going to make a move, get her out of here. So Swan thinks she's doing the right thing by sending her on the chase to do chase the false dragon. But meanwhile, this just opens up a seat for Elida to just rise on up to become the sitter, is what I assume she's going to do. So that's what I was talking about, where she thinks that people thinks that Elida's leaving breadcrumbs to follow, but really it's just Elida setting them into a trap. So she's a schemer.
You nailed it, Paul. I think that was really well said. She was, for those that don't know, one of the biggest actor gets for this entire season. Like when the announcement came out, because she's known, she was a huge character in The Expanse. She voices in The Arcane. She probably has 100 other things. But I was really excited for her because she is just the spice you need in the politics of Tarvalon. And I think she's handling this so well. Like, she's not even getting that much screen time, and she's doing so much with what she's getting. And then even that little bit that she tells Min about the foretelling, when she says, like, we're both seers. Like, I had a vision about Andor needing to be basically just in the right spot for the last battle to be won. So that even alone, while she is messing with Min, that line gives you some context into the cold opening from season 2, which is super important, I think, just to give you more weight on her character of how many strings she was pulling all throughout Morgase's reign. So a lot of good came from this, and I'm excited for where this is going, because Elida is a character, is what I'll say. She is a freaking character.
I'm gonna I'll first address the fact that I was calling Andor a kingdom last episode, and Elida puts me in my place this episode because she says the queendom of Andor, which makes sense because there can't be a king in Andor. It's only queens. So I don't want to say I regret that because I didn't know any better at the time, but I liked that they put that in there. And once I heard that for the first time, I was like, damn, I got to make an apology now.
It's so weird because we were just talking about the Forsaken and how they don't really trust each other. And then we go to the tower and like Elida's like giving these gifts to like the other red sisters, but none of the sisters want to take them. Like they don't eat strawberries or wear the jewelry because they don't trust her. They don't know what the hell's going on. So it's just a great comparison that, hey, this is going on everywhere. It's not just with the Forsaken. People don't know who to trust. And then the last thing I kind of have about this scene and Elida in general is we see early on her bracelet with a red stone and like a serpent over it. It's like, I don't know if it's causing her hand to shake or if she's seeing it and then that in turn causes her hand to shake. Min references it when they have their second sit down, and she says that bracelet, is that a foretelling too? And Elida says, like, in a way it is, but she doesn't really give a good answer. So that's the only other thing I'm like keeping my eye on. And I'm only doing this off of association from what it looks like, but it looks like the necklace that the Red Witch from Game of Thrones, the
Melisandre?
she would take it off. Melisandre, yeah. It literally looks like that, but I don't want to associate it with like it's literally keeping her young or anything like that. But that's the first thing I thought of.
The tremors was interesting. I wasn't entirely sure what they were trying. It almost felt like, to me, because I know she has some foretellings, I was like, is she like canceling out of foretelling right there? Like, is she like shaking it off? Like, nah, like not right now. Like, wait till later. I didn't entirely get that, so I guess we'll just have to see what happens there. Speaking of the foretelling stuff too, I just love the line where she mentions like we see the future, but like that's not where our power lies. Our power lies in the lead up and the aftermath. So like the way that she maneuvers around these certainties is just so interesting. That's just an interesting way to kind of talk about knowing the future. You know, like you can know the act itself, and then she maneuvers to benefit the most from when that thing happens, and then also has plans for after that thing happens. I just think that was a great way to characterize Elida.
Emer.
Yeah. And as we fade out of this, can't leave without giving a shout out to Liana. I just think that while it's being portrayed actually as overconfident, because she's just kind of kicking Elida whenever she can, where she's saying like, go back and get a sitter and, you know, basically go get a babysitter and maybe you can see the Amerlin. And then when they're like, oh, we haven't seen you around the red quarters. And she says, I followed the rats. Like the Blues hate the Reds hate the Blues. And Liana's really rubbing the power she has in their face. But that leads perfectly into the second thing, and that both of you two, being Paul and Dave, in season 1, were very adamant about you had a feeling that there was going to be some type of split, schism, civil war, mutiny within the White Tower. Curious if you're feeling even more confident about a prediction like that after this episode.
I would say it's already happened. I mean, the Black Ages have separated themselves. We're already past that, and we are bracing for another battle, as we've been alluded to in the last episode.
Okay.
Yeah, same as Dave.
And-
This is weird coming off of Dune Prophecy too, and jumping right into this with, you know, Queen Morghese too, right? I mean, was she not?
That was Calanthe. That was Calanthe.
That was the Calanthe reference.
Yeah.
Yes.
It wasn't Queen Morghese. Yeah, Queen Morghese was the same actress as Dune Prophecy. That's what you were saying.
Oh.
Wait.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
plays not the main sister. She's Tula.
Yes, Tula from
Yeah,
Dune
Tula Harkonnen.
Prophecy.
What?
That's what you didn't get that. Okay, that's what I was
No.
saying. Between the sisterhood and the split, and then having Tula and Queen Morghese, I was like, dude, this is like an
God.
insane lap over.
Why don't you bring that up, Kyle?
I could have sworn I texted you about that when they announced her casting, but maybe I didn't.
Oh, that was like a year ago. That was like 100 podcasts ago.
So
But
fair enough for him to forget.
To get us back on track, I don't know if this was the second time for this episode, we did get a name drop, and I'll let you kind of say it, Kyle, if you want. Did we not get to the Taim thing here?
Oh, yes. That's actually one of the things that I was going to say as well. And Dave, you immediately naturally latched on to this, I believe in season 1, when they first mentioned it, that there was another false dragon. So we had Logain who got caught Gentles, and then there was another one that popped up, Matrim Time. We're getting just another reinforcement of this. They're teasing Dave Talda specifically because we have another strong guy that can channel out there.
I love the false dragons, man. I love them.
Would you be okay? So we established last episode that you would be a Forsaken for sure if you had the choice. But do you think you'd rather be a false dragon or a Forsaken?
Forsaken. So if you're going to ask me to be the real dragon, then I'll probably consider the real dragon. I don't want to be a false dragon. Why be a false dragon when I could be a real badass Forsaken? Just murder.
Fair enough.
Jesus.
Okay, so this next part of the Tarvalon White Tower thing we're going to talk about is going to be the Black Aja hunt with Nynaeve and Elaine. I think there's 2 big parts here. So the first part is actually them investigating the sisters, the Black sisters that got left behind. So it's Joya, who is the gray sister, who is bald. Then Amiko is the yellow sister. They're asking them questions. I really like these scenes. And then we can also talk about them heading to Leandra and Son's quarters, where they get a little bit more information.
I love Elaine. I'm now with you, Kyle. I see the vision. Elaine is great. Not to dismiss Nynaeve. Nynaeve was also amazing here. I thought the 2 of them being able to determine what was important to look for by what the Black Ajas were not saying was just really cool. I thought that was just a great way to deduce what they needed to find out in terms of information. It's just great. I love these 2. Even the Black Ajas are underestimating them, saying, you know, you guys are just servants. And this was why Swan recruited them in the first place. I mean, the Black Ajas do make a point to say, what can you get out of us that your sisters before you already haven't tried, and here we are. The two servants that gain no respect from any of the Aes Sedai are here making power moves. And this is just great for both of these characters. But I'm definitely on Kyle's side, Team Elaine all day.
What's the opposing team?
I was.
I'm just, I guess, saying that I like Elaine more than I do Nynaeve still.
Oh, well,
Also,
that's day one.
Yeah.
The team is you're a real one with eyes, and then people who have no taste in culture. That's the team.
Yes. Yeah.
So Dave, okay. And as I'm saying that on the backup, I don't mean that the people who like Nynaeve have no taste or culture. That's not
Anyone. Basically, no. Anyone
you can be both on Team Nynaeve and Team Elaine. It's not mutually exclusive. But if you're
Anyone that
riding
doesn't
Team
see-
Elaine, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're buying merch for Elaine, that means you're cool, and Dave's on that team.
Yes. Thank you.
Just to clarify.
I was
Mhm.
kind of predicting more that Elaine and Egwene were going to be like the insane duo to go on into history. We talked about it in the beginning of season 2 when we first get introduced to Elaine. She's talking about the legendary duos that met. And I was talking about how they're literally zooming in on her face and the sun's getting brighter behind her as she's saying this. So like it was kind of a prediction. But it's interesting to see Elaine and then Nynaeve be the duo and go on and be like, they even kind of like have friction, but Nynaeve has friction with freaking everybody, so that's not a surprise.
Yes, she does.
But like they're not even like best buds, but they're still like duoing it up, and like it was really cool to see them researching and actually figuring it out too. Like Dave was saying, it was making a lot of sense, and the fact they were smart enough to set aside the BS. But what was cool from the interrogation scenes was Joya, I believe, the bald-headed one, was saying, I know a killer when I see one, and I believe you, Nynaeve, when you say you're going to kill me. And I'd like to believe she was telling the truth there. She wasn't leaning into the lies to try to distract them. I'd like to believe that Joya was being serious in that moment, because Nynaeve is a killer.
And one thing I want to add, which I thought you were about to say, is another really cool concept. It might have been said in the past, but I thought it was here that we get the reveal that the Black Aja work in groups of 3 called hearts, so that they
Yes.
never know too much information. And that's a really cool idea to me, and just something to keep in the back of your head if we see any others in the future.
Well, everyone is in a group of 3, kind of +1. So, for example, Lanfear's son here, you or Hart might be me, you and Dave, and then your +1 would be Paul. But like me and
Right.
Dave wouldn't know Paul or know that Paul was Black Aja,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
which is I just like that part of it
Makes
too.
it even
And
more
Amiko,
deceitful. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I like the 2 different lies here because they both sound good to me. They probably would have fooled me just because they sound great. She went to Saldea to fight the false dragon Matrim Time. We just talked about how we're down to clown on that storyline for sure. And then the other one being Leandrin's going to Tyr to get Kalendor for a Forsaken. Sure, I'm okay with either of those. Let's do both.
Yeah,
of
can
those. But we
both be
find
just
out.
true? Yeah.
Yeah, we find
I typed
out
them down.
a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
I typed both of them down. I was like, oh shit, she's giving us good information. Type that down.
Felt like
You
the
didn't backspace, you
Tyrion
kept
scene
it right.
from Game of Thrones when he's trying to find the rat, of like telling all the false stories, and then the one gets back to Cersei.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking
Oh
about.
yeah.
Okay, so
But
we
anyway,
can now move
yeah.
into this kind of attempted assassination scene. So just very loosely, Nynaeve and Elaine find this mark on the floor in Leandrin's son's spot, his old spot, and they learn that it's from Tenchico because they're doing some research near, I guess, the Browns' quarters. They probably have their own little libraries in that area. They're searching through Varen's notes, essentially, when an old friend, I guess one of many old friends, we get a gray man comes in, attempts to murder them. A little bit of chaos ensues, and I think we leave this scene specifically with a little bit of uncomfortableness.
Mm-hmm.
Varen is not painting herself in a good picture right now. She definitely has, my spidey senses are going off around her nowadays because, Egwene and Elaine already kind of had their suspicions of Varen, while we on the other end kind of know how close she is to Swan. and how they have been secretly kind of working together. They have been viewing Varen as a possible target, it seems like to me, as someone who could potentially be a Black Aja. And the whole key component of that is that here at the end, Varen sends them off to their dorms without asking the question, who could have done this? And that kind of leads them and the audience to believe that Varen could be the one that stabbed the gray man, which officially killed him. I don't know. I'd like to believe that Varen is good, but there are definitely now some signs that might say otherwise.
Paul, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So I never suspected Varen before this. I mean, Swan brings it up last episode where she's like, I can't trust anybody, including Varen. And I was like, oh, you can't trust our girl? But now, like, it is super weird. Like, Nynaeve brings up a good point. She didn't even reference that the gray man was stabbed. And then, when you go back and look at it, it was Varen who put Egwene. I'm sorry, it was Varen who put Nynaeve and Elaine on this mission of interrogating the Black Aja, which was supposed to be just a dead end because, like maybe if Varen knew that they were part of the Black Aja, they were just gonna, run Nynaeve in circles with false information. But at the same time, could be Varen just trying to do her job. She's part of the Brown Aja. She's trying to get information. So it's super weird, but with Nynaeve pointing out, it is suspicious, and she's higher on the radar of sus than she's ever been. Varen, that is.
Yeah. And I just keep going back to the scene of her and Moraine in last season when Moraine is about to, or is considering killing Varen, and Varen looks at her and is like, oh, okay, I see you're willing to do anything for the dragon. That's good. Like, we need that. Like, that scene just still sticks with me and makes me want to believe that she's good. Otherwise, Moraine totally fucked up and should have stabbed her there. But I'm going to still side with Varen is good for now. But yes, flags are definitely being raised for her right now.
That's a good callback, because that scene was one of my favorites from season 2 of the Aes Sedai talking. So that's a good callback. But isn't there, we're missing also the piece here where they discover the drawing of the Adam. How do you say him?
The second. Okay,
Adam.
sorry. The second one made me laugh. I think they just kind of say Adam in the book. Oh, I'm sorry, in the show.
I am so pissed that this invention's coming back, because it's obviously horrible for anybody that is aware, or anyone that uses the one power and becomes subject to this. I think it's a terrible thing. And they're obviously, as we, spoiler alert, we'll later find out, they're planning on using it on the dragon. These people, these Black Ajas, they're terrible.
I have to bring this up because I thought it was hysterical. Re-listening to their season 2 coverage at the end of episode 2, season 2, we were talking about the Ta Angreal versus the Sa Angreal, and we were asking you guys questions about what they are, what the differences are, and you guys were trying to explain to us how, one has more power and the other one is just kind of specified for one thing. And Dave was like, oh, okay, so like forks versus sporks. You guys were like, well, I don't know about that. Like, that's not exactly the best comparison. But I just every time I see a Ta Angreal, I'm like, oh, it's a spork or something like that. In the back of my
Honestly,
head.
that still sounds like a great comparison to me.
It's just so funny.
The follow-up question was, which one's which? Because I also still don't understand it. But if it works for you, it works for you.
Yeah.
All we want is a level of understanding. So that's all we need there.
God.
I think the Varen stuff was interesting because Nynaeve is like, why are you here? And it's like, I fucking live here. What are you talking about? Which I thought was really funny. And I don't know how much I agreed with the why is it suspicious that Varen didn't ask who stabbed him. Like, Varen isn't stupid. Like, she can see that he has a knife in his chest. Like, maybe she doesn't need your input or opinion. I don't know. It felt like a little odd of a. I can understand, I think, why Nynaeve thought that way, because they're paranoid. They almost just died, that stuff. But it felt odd to me walking away from that scene. I was like, okay,
and I'm
so what? Varen didn't ask you.
And I'm pretty sure their suspicions of Varen all stem from Varen having a conversation with someone last episode that was supposed to be
Liana.
kind of Liana, yeah. And I think they saw that, and the way Varen and Liana reacted to seeing them kind of sketched them out. So I think that's why they're a little bit more high alert around Varen.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
I think we're ready to move on here. I just will say that the other Angreal, so Ter, Sa, that Varen had cataloged that they stole, those will come back around. It's not all about the main event being the male Adom.
Right.
Okay. Whoa, I totally just ruined my notes. Psych. Okay. Moving into Matt, which I can tell Luke wants to get to. So let's just talk about all of this at once. Essentially, we get Matt apologizing to Min. Finally, they're kind of going back and forth throughout this season, but it feels like now they've squashed it because Min sees a vision of him that she feels bad about, and Matt squashes it on his end by beating the piss out of Galad and Gawain. So that's kind of a win-win here.
I don't want to jump in for scenes first before you guys often, but this is a scene for me and Kyle, so I am going to jump in first. Well, the one thing I'll just point out off the top is that I'm happy that Matt and Min like made up, because Min didn't apologize enough and like they need it more. And, Matt realizes that she's actually being genuine about it. So I'm happy we can just kind of squash that beef and they got over it. But moving forward, this scene is the iconic scene that like everybody in the fandom loves to death. Like this is one of the most talked about scenes. It's the thing that I was teased by in episode 2 when Gawain and Galad are fighting. I thought that was it. I thought that was when Matt steps up and just fucks them up, dude. But this scene, I was getting emotional. I'm about to get emotional again right now. It was so freaking cool. The music, the choreography, the way he's cocky just fits his character so well. I thought this was perfection. I thought this was so good. And that's not even to take away from the fact that also right before this fight, we have one of the craziest visions that Min has ever shown us. And it's just Matt hanging. Wow. Which, give me your guys' take on that, because for book readers, this is just pure perfection, most of this. And yeah, like the fight was good. Oh, there was so much good here and I could just gush about it forever. But just to cut it short, like, what do you guys think? Like, how'd you guys react to both the Min vision and then the direct fight and like what this actually means for Matt as a character?
You can go first, Paul. I feel like I've had this stage for the past 2 days here. I'll let you go first on your reaction.
The vision's interesting because last season we talked a lot about it. It's hard to portray something theoretically like in a vision without you wanting to assume it's exactly what's going to happen. But just going back to last season alone, we saw Min's vision of Matt stabbing Rand with the dagger, but it ended up being Matt kind of throwing the dagger at Rand, which not the same, but it's similar vision. So when you look at Matt hanging from a noose, you're like, okay, like, is this trying to say that he's going to try to kill himself? Is this say that he's going to try to be the subject of an execution? Is this just to show that like he's on the edge? Like, so it's really hard right now to know what that actually means, but it's basically just red flag. Matt is in trouble, and I don't know. I'm thinking it obviously leans more towards suicide than execution. But I'm not feeling strongly about one thing or the other right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it before. Min's visions are not necessarily clear cut. You can read between the lines with them. Maybe it's a vision of Matt just literally just hanging out somewhere. He's going to be chilling. It's not him actually hanging. We did see the vision of Rand in season 2 was supposed to get stabbed by Matt, which he does, but it's more so from a throw rather than actually getting stabbed up close. There's different ways to interpret it. I'm definitely curious to see. If this vision does come true, I obviously don't think it's going to come true at least anytime soon. In terms of Matt's safe to me. Matt feels like a safe character that will not die anytime soon. So whatever this vision is, if he does end up hanging somewhere, someone will save him, I think. But yes, Luke, I'm with you. I said last episode that Min was not on good seating with me, but I think after the apology here, it was genuine. The makeup, she's back on good standing with me. And Matt using a quarterstaff, I think, is fucking awesome. While personally, I'll admit I'm a sword guy. I love me either a katana, dual blade, something. The quarterstaff is awesome. There's just so many iconic characters that I feel like I can think of who use a quarterstaff. I think of like Aang. I think, even though that's not technically a staff, in a way it is. I think of Aang, Goku when he's a kid, Wukong, Sun Wukong. There's just so many cool characters that wield a staff, and Matt, I feel like, is going to be one of those characters that I will now remember as a quarterstaff master.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
No
have
no
so
notes
many
for the
things
Matt
to
fight.
say.
Yeah. The Matt fight was incredible.
I think that so it's important to also remember that when Matt takes the tea that Ishii gives him in season 2, he has the same experience of the hanging. So
Okay.
that
Oh,
also
yeah.
happens in that night where Ishii made him like live all of his lives.
Mhm.
I just want to call that out. The second thing I want to call out is that so Luke, we talked about at the end of episode 2 about how it felt like Galad felt weird, kind of, especially to you. I didn't like the whole Bang and Broads thing. It felt slightly out of character. This felt like Galad in character, like stepping in between Matt and Min, kind of misreading the situation, but knowing in his heart, it's like, I need to do the right thing here. I need to protect this woman. Does it again with Nynaeve. And I love the line read of, mate, have a day off. Like, Matt is just having a terrible day. And then Galad's ass is just making it so worse. And then that just prompts Matt to be like, fuck it. Like 2v1, 2 silver marks apiece. Like, let's get it popping.
Yeah, you're like,
and
2.
Yep.
I think the quarter staff to the shin.
I got a quarter shaft
brutal.
for you.
Yeah, well, we know you do. The quarter staff, that just made me remember of season 1. I forget we got into a conversation about quarter shafts, wink wink, and it was hilarious when that happened. But I'm curious, Luke, I guess maybe your opinion, mostly because in the books this scene happens like we got teased last episode, where it's in the training yard during the day in front of a ton of people. Like Matt's just out there. He walks out there, blah, 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 blah. Here it happens in front of no one, only Nynaeve. And at first I was like, damn, I wanted him to have like his moment in the sun, like in front of all the novices that probably maybe think he's a dork now because of the horn and his memories and stuff. But now I'm kind of curious if it's going to be this boy who cried wolf thing where it's like, oh, well, I beat both Galad and Gawain at the same time, and everyone's like, classic Matt. Like, no one believes that. Like, you always like chat shit, basically. So I'm kind of looking to see if that's what it'll be like. We get a bit of that, and this is, I think, a transition here to the end of this bucket where we get the fact that Elaine, Nynaeve, Matt, and then sneakily Min are heading to Tan Chico. And as he's walking away, he kind of says, like, did your brothers mention that I beat the shit out of them, basically? Yeah. So I think that that's going to be a thing. And in that perspective, I love it.
So do I. I have no notes either for that.
Yeah. And before, I guess, we move to Tanchico, I want to just call out that he says again the line, I'm going to butcher it because Donald delivers it so fantastically in the old tongue of the Doviande Setovia Saigon. He says that before he blows the horn. The translation into our language, their language, is it's time to toss the dice, which is just like, hell so yeah. Fitting. That's what he says before he goes into battle. It's just like, it's so badass. I just love that.
I said this to Dave that like Matt might not be my favorite character, but his peak moments are just like as high as they get. He just has some of the best moments.
They're all doing, I think, so well. I think Nynaeve, in terms of the Edmondsfield 5, is suffering the most this season. She's just the least interesting. It's very obvious that her story is less cool than everyone else's. Matt is unbelievable this season. I think Donald Finn, too. We benefited from that actor change. I think we can be honest about it. Donald Finn, rather, has been he's literally Matt. He is Matt. It's just so cool.
And he's made me belly laugh like 10 times this season already. Like, he is funny. And that's how Matt has to be.
It's so good. Okay. We have to talk about this. I don't know how much we'll get into it because we really talked about the Mogideon side of it. We talked about the Mal Adom side of it. We just have Leandrin and her squad crashing a wedding. Leandrin, they've really, I don't want to say force fed us, but they're making her a very big character. We talked about maybe episode 1 that we love to hate her. So I'm just kind of curious if there was any, I don't know, interest, feeling, emotion that came out of this part of the episode.
I'm kind of back on the side of pity a little bit. I mean, if I understood her backstory at all, what I gathered was that she was married off to someone, and the wedding that she's crashing was her great grandson's wedding. First, I want to confirm that. Okay. And then I took it as she was married off to someone in a shitty, there was no altar. It was a shitty place that the wedding took place, but she got married before she was 13. And then she became 13. And then the quote I have, because I legitimately couldn't hear it. I just could not for the life of me understand what she said. I have the quote as something about sue me in addition to this in our wholesome little family. That line about our wholesome little family, she says like sue me. And I'm like, she's definitely not saying sue me, but I can't read or hear what she's saying there.
It wasn't very important. It was just a sarcastic comment about the fact that his great grandfather, forcibly married her, forcibly impregnated her. Like the happy little family was just a very sarcastic comment about that.
Okay, so I am right in that she was young, pre-13 before she got married. And
can I just say that, Dave, you just said that you are back on the pity side after Leandrin just ripped the heart out of some man in the middle of his wedding. That is crazy.
Guy deserved it. The guy's marrying like an 11-year-old, and now while the scene is very quick, we do have a little bit more into Leandrin's backstory and why she is so traumatized nowadays. And so I feel bad that she had to experience all that when she was a child. I don't know how she got herself there or what her parents did to her to put her in that position, but it's tragic at the end of the day. So still a little bit of pity side, but the fact that she killed her sisters is always going to trump that. And just, she betrayed her family, her current family, and I think she's still, but there's a little pity.
Mm-hmm.
When you say family, you're talking about the Aes Sedai?
Yes.
Okay. I just think she forcibly lobotomizes this little girl, basically, because she had a difficult time dealing with her own trauma, and that was just like, yo. I mean, Black Aja totally fits, but like, yo. I think the last thing I'll leave this with, and Paul, hopefully maybe this sets you up for a comment as well, because I see you're about to say something of the movement from we're gonna collar the Dragon Reborn himself into Mogadine walking by with a serving tray and cracking a smile into softly from the shadows fade into black was like, okay, they know what they're doing.
Yes, they do. Guys, so good.
Yeah. I mean, that whole last sequence of scenes was absolutely insane. Dave, for your part, I did see a little bit. Like pity, like jumped up for a second with Leandrin when she was talking about her backstory, but then she just murders and slaughters everybody. I like that Leandrin is talking to this girl, and she kind of explains that Naomi is actually really good with messing with the mind and memories, and that kind of explains why she could escape episode 1 from Varen and the other high ranked sisters, is because she had this special ability that is super strong. So it was kind of cool to see a little bit more of Naomi. And then with the sigil, the chalk and the salt sigil, she's like painting this down where her son was born. I know Elaine and Nynaeve talked about it. I guess I'm just a little confused about whether this is just a ritual, like a funeral ritual, or if this is a ritual to try to bring him back from the dead, or bring him back. It's just
a culture thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's nothing beyond showing emotion behind losing her son. Okay. Cool. No. I didn't think so, but her one line of saying like "find your way back to me," I'm sure that's just like his soul and being or something. But I got a little confused. But that's good just to put a pin in a stamp on that there's nothing really beyond it.
I was gonna say don't put a pin in it.
Yeah,
I have
no.
two quick comments and then we can probably exit the scene. But something I'm just applauding the show for, and I hope that it stays this way. I like how locked in they were for the CGI different colors of the strands. I'm always like rooting for them to be consistent with the use of the different elemental parts of the weaves, and they were pretty damn specific. It was like blue and green or whatever was the memory here. So I hope that they keep doing that. And then my other piece is I do love that Mogideon was in the background, but part of me wishes that they didn't focus on her in the same way that they did. One of my favorite parts of the entire show was the Pat Fane being in the background of random shots in season 1 that never got focus itself, really, unless you were very much paying attention. It would have been a cool reveal if Mogideon was in the background of a bunch of these scenes without like drawing a question. Because I don't know, did you guys see her before they focus on her? Because I caught her like in the corner
Yeah.
while it was still Leandrin talking. So that would have been a cool thing for you to bring up. But they do give it to, and it ends up being cool anyway, how she's just like calculated.
It's interesting you say that because I genuinely thought that Leandra knew that Mogideon was there and she was working with a Forsaken. I like was going to ask it as a question, like, is Mogideon like undercover right now? Is she does Naomi and Leandra not know they're in the presence? But I genuinely was on the side that they knew because Leandrin was a dark friend. She's worked with Forsaken before, but now with your reaction, Luke, it seems that Mogideon is kind of undercover, and I just made note of like the Jade Teapot. Is that going to be a thing? Is she like doing like poisoning somebody? Is she making moves, or is she just being a servant right now and undercover? So I didn't know, but now it seems like she is undercover.
Nynaeve better walk into that place and just blow it up. She better just like, I don't even know what the right description is, but just like completely burst out with power and just blow that place up.
If there is
Nynaeve's
one
got
chance
ED right now.
If there is one chance for Nynaeve to redeem herself in her plot, it's definitely just ultimate one power blow up and just destroy everyone in that room. Going back to the symbol really quickly, we're kind of led to believe that the symbols is Leandrin trying to bring her son back. I think the quote was,
"Are you joking?"
Yeah, I was writing notes.
You just
Sorry, so we
out?
can cut this, but yeah, I was writing notes up for myself, so I missed that. But yeah, you can
don't want to cut it, but we have to now. That was so
funny.
I knew when I was going to say it that it was already talked about because I zoned out writing up some notes literally while you guys were talking about what I figured was the conversation.
Yeah,
it's cultural. It's not trying to bring your son back.
Yeah.
Okay.
My last comment on this whole scene, though, is right before Mogideon walks out with that teapot. She looks over at the drawing of the brace of the male Adom, and she kind of smirks and smiles, and then you hear the softly from the shadows, which, okay, softly from the shadows totally makes sense now that she is hiding in the shadows. She is undercover. Nobody knows who she is, so that kind of makes sense. Okay, but going back, I was thinking, who would she eye this up for? Is she looking at this Adom item kind of more as who does she want to take under control? One of the Forsaken or the Dragon Reborn? Is she going to try to get it to just get the Dragon Reborn and become like Bliss, the lieutenant? Nabliss, that's what it was. Is she making moves to become the Nabliss? Like it's really, really cool, and there's so much going on that anything's possible.
No, good predictions.
A little pneumatic device for you here. So when you officially become the Nabliss, you got to hit the nay.
There you go.
You got to hit the nay.
And then you're in Bliss.
Remember it, yeah.
Oh my God! You hit the nay in Bliss. You hit the nay in Bliss. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm in Bliss. I'm in Bliss.
That's good.
Never gonna forget
it. Yeah, we're gonna leave. Nynaeve, the writers, please tell me she's gonna ball out this season. We're heading. I was gonna say heading head first. That's kind of naturally what you do, but we're coming to a confrontation here. We're hunting down Leandrin. I have high hopes for this, so we're gonna have to see what happens here. Okay. We've got the final setting is going to be the Aiel Waste. So we're officially in the Waste. We ended last episode. We're meeting Ruark. We're meeting Bear. And now we're traveling within the Waste. We meet an older faction that we left behind in season 1, I believe was last time we've seen them. They've been in better shape. So we have the Tinkers strewn across the ground. We learn a little bit here about the Aiel culture, a little bit about the clan structure, and a lot of those things. So I want to just kind of stop here and have a talk about that stuff.
And pause for 1 second. This can even stay on pod. I just want to ask, we don't get names of some characters in this bucket, right? Do we want to avoid saying them, or do we get them all?
I'm arrogantly confident that if you like did the X-ray stuff, it will tell you, and then we get them later on. Like we know who they are.
Okay.
In like the credits of the credits of the show tell you who they are, and they just haven't really said their names yet, so it's not like a spoiler.
The Duncan, Idaho guy get a name yet?
No.
Again,
No,
not technically, but his name is Ruark.
Ruark. Okay, let me.
You're not going to remember that in 2 seconds
no,
anyway.
No,
so
I got it. I've written down, highlighted. We're not going to forget.
Yeah,
So
go ahead. How'd you spell that?
Notes.
Let me see how you spelled that.
You said Ruark, right? Ruarc.
I knew difficult to get a silent H. They get everybody, but it's RH.
Rhuarc.
Yeah, they got you.
What have I been saying? That I'm always one letter off of these name spellings. It's legitimately every time it's one letter. It's always those silent H killers.
Are you going to adjust now, you think, where like you spelled the first time and then you have to sit there and think, okay, what's the letter I'm missing?
Every name you guys have given me, I write it down in the way that I think how it's phonetically sounding to me, so I don't fuck it up, basically. So that's how I do it.
It's better to do it that way.
But yeah, some really cool moments here for at least the Aiel background. We find out the names of one of the other tribes called the Shiloh, I believe is what I heard.
Shido.
Shido, okay. Another correction to the notes going in there, but yeah.
Clan as well.
Okay.
The clans.
Shido clan. Clans, not tribes. Okay, gotcha. Definitely just really interested to get more the differences between them all. All we got really was that there was a blood feud, and I guess that's what separated the Shido clan from whatever the clan is that we are currently with. I don't know how many there are total. I don't know if they've established that yet, but definitely interesting to see. We know that the Aiel Waste is huge, and even Lucas kind of showed me maps a little bit, and it seems like the Aiel Waste kind of takes up half of the continent, essentially. So we have a lot of factions coming. We've already been introduced to a lot of factions just on the western part of the world, and here we are on the eastern part, and we have a lot more, I imagine, to come into play here. I do like Ruark's introduction here. He seemed like a very noble man in terms of, everyone wanted to get out of there once they figured out it was the Shido that had murdered the Tinkers, but he was the one that said, I will stay back and bury these people. So very noble, honorable man. Can definitely tell I'm going to be liking him in the future.
I'm glad you caught that.
I didn't catch that it was the Tinkers, so that's really cool that they were able to weave that in. I just thought it was like a convoy of another camp.
They said
people.
A different name that wasn't Tinkers, though, right? They said something
They're
else.
from the Lost Ones.
What is it called? The Tuathlon or something. They got another name.
I wanted to see what you were coming out with there because you made fun of me last episode for the Carathion cycle or whatever I said. So I let you stumble on that one. But they do say 2 names here. So I use the Tinkers because that's what we were using in season 1 because it was the easiest one. But the old tongue name, like the official name, let's say, and that's the name that Aiel use. Actually, that's a lie. That's the name Egwene uses here, is the Tuathlon. And then the Aiel call them the Lost Ones. We'll just stick with Tinkers.
Tinkers is easy.
And I thought the Lost Ones just meant lost in the Aiel Waste, but either way, I'd love the line that Avienda says is the only thing more dishonorable than not defending yourself is killing someone not defending themselves. So
that was the point. That was the hint.
Yes, knowing the Tinkers, that makes so much more sense. So I love that.
And the little caravans that they had flipped over to, that's like what they were using in the first season or 2.
True.
As we leave,
and
go ahead.
Sorry. Last thing that was really interesting was the discussion whether it was a spear wound or a sword wound that was made to look like a spear. Lan and is trying to defend his his swordsmanship people and saying, hey, this was a spear made to look like a sword wound, which then led to the Shido conversation. So,
which is also interesting that the Shido were planning their steps to the point where they wanted it to make it look like someone else did it and not them. So don't know who they're trying to, I guess, pin the blame on, we'll say, but yeah, definitely.
So Dave, to answer your question, there are 12 Aiel clans. We are with the Tardad. They'll mention that a ton, so you can try to commit to memory, but hopefully the show reinforces it along with the Shido clan. And then the last piece I'll say to move us into a really fun couple scenes is that Rand kind of tries to get a little information out of Ruark about the trial of Ruidion, and Ruark just says to him, you know too much and too little. I just like that line. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was.
It's like you two know too much and too little sometimes as well. Okay,
know
talk
the
about
whole
someone who
story.
knows too much and too little a little bit. So we have Egwene here is learning about dream walking from Bear, and then we also have Rand is in a dream having a conversation with Lanfear. We'll probably talk about them isolated, but I just want to kind of create a coherent-ish conversation before moving on to something completely different.
I love that it's being revealed that Egwene is a quote-unquote dream walker or whatever you want to call that, because it's just a very funny parallel. It's, Luz Theron falls in love with Lanfear, who is, a master of dreams. And here we have Rand, who is now dating a person who can navigate through their dreams. So very, very interesting parallels there. And I think it's also really great for Egwene's character. I mean, we knew that she was powerful, but this kind of gives her a distinguishable power that seems to be very broken, especially the way Lanfear uses it. I think the potential is even that much higher for Egwene here. So great stuff for her.
yeah, they talk about, the wise ones a little bit. Bear's saying, we're the only two out of all the wise ones. It was me and one other person that could dream walk. I was a little confused, but then they kind of go into it when they're in the sweat house. They're saying that wise ones are just the female ones that go through the mist, aka like the test. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the way that the Aiel culture works is that you have a clan chief, so that ends up being a man who has to go through the trial to be worthy of being a chief, and then they will have a wise one. So it's just kind of like a wisdomly, like that, wisdomly. Because I was like, oh, wisdom, that's actually another thing that I shouldn't say, because that's an actual title with Nynaeve, but just like an advisor, someone who is aware of a lot of things about Aiel culture, past history, all that kind of stuff.
Similar how Aes Sedai are kind of advisors to kings and queens.
Wise ones would
more parallels.
absolutely hate that comparison and parallel, but that is correct. Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify two things. Maybe the most minor spoilers of all time, but not even. It's more about our conversation on the last podcast where in the beginning of this whole bucket, Egwene says to Bear, like, you were in my dream. And then she says, no, you were in my dream. And I just wanted to clarify that because I feel like connecting the dots for you, Dave. I talked you through this last night, was just that you were trying to guess like who the snitch was, but it was like Bear literally saw Egwene. So that's how they knew that they were coming. But that aside, and then the other thing I wanted to say was that oh yeah, the other thing that gets clarified here too, that we were going back and forth a little bit about was Rena the embodiment of Rena that was choking out Egwene? Was that just like her dreams and she was reacting to it? But Bear kind of confirms that if she's getting hurt from it, it was somebody. So I think we can just connect the dots and say that Lanfear was the one kind of torturing her in that scene.
She said she's alive, right?
She said
referring to the entity.
Saying like if Rena in your dream was choking you out, that person choking you out was a real person, like was alive. And you saw 5 seconds before that happens, it is Lanfear, is it not? And then she switches her face to Rena and then chokes her out.
I think that Bear's explanation was a little more maybe metaphysical, spiritual, saying that kind of along the concept of like a person only truly dies when they're actually forgotten, where Rena isn't dead because the dreams that Egwene is having that she's in it are physically impacting her in the real world. So it's as if she's there. in the real
So,
world. That's how I took
You don't
that.
think it was Lanfear too? Then I feel like it was so obvious that it was Lanfear, but we're having this discussion.
I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm simply saying what I think Bear was trying to say to Egwene.
And
Yeah,
Paul,
I'm
let's get
kind
your
of-
It
take
was-
on it. Let's
It
get Paul's
was,
take.
yeah,
on it.
100% Lanfear. It showed Lanfear's face, I thought.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
in
all
my
I needed.
mind, it's
Yeah.
100% Lanfear. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we didn't find that out until this next scene where Rand and Lanfear are together in that hut again. And, you know, Rand's like, you can't bring me here. And Lanfear's like, dude, you brought me here this time.
Mhm.
So hard to tell whether she's lying or not. You don't never know, like, whether she's scheming or whether she's telling the truth, especially right here where she's talking about, you know, the Sangreal, the strongest calendar for women this time, though. And if they channel at the same time, then they can take down the Dark One, and that would release her from her dark oaths. What would happen if you're released from the dark oaths? She doesn't really say. She kind of disappears. She's like, oh, I shouldn't have said anything. And it's like so confusing because is she trying to like come to the good side? Is she trying to abandon? Is this all a play that she's just manipulating? Rand, it's I don't have a strong answer, but it's so fun to get little hints and lean one way or the other.
And I think your
Come on.
reaction is exactly what the show writers wanted you to react like, because my God, she's such a good actor. But I love the mention at the Sangreal here that she says is stronger than Calendar. That was just unexpected, but awesome.
Mhm.
The thing that holds me back from that opinion is that she's wrong in that it's not a Sangreal for women in the book. So either this is a change or Lanfear has a misunderstanding of what it is.
I thought she said that a woman and a man need to use together.
I would
I
agree.
thought she was
I
also
agreed with
talking about-
Paul.
Okay.
So go ahead,
Like
Paul.
Calendor and the other Sangreal, you need to use both of them together.
Oof.
So-
I feel like we need the words here of what the show said. I don't know.
Is this us
Yeah.
pausing to look?
I'm biased because I saw it with Luke, and I think we agreed on the same thing. So I think I took it as there's a Sangreal that requires both a man and woman to use at the same time that is
I think-
stronger than Calendor.
I think she does say if a man and a woman used it together at the same time, not them together. So I think I
Like
was
it could be
mistaken.
used
I
by
think
one
she-
person, implying
No, like a man and a woman have to use the same individual Sangreal. Not I
Okay.
was initially I was taking that as you have to use Calendor, the man has to use that, and then the woman has to use
Okay.
this other Sangreal.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I think they're talking about they both channel into the same one.
That's my understanding too. And that's not even necessarily the same thing as the book. So like we can't even like directly pull knowledge from that. It's more about like what did they say?
And it's
Hold on.
No, okay. So I don't know if we want to start like an official
Yeah, let's start
restart
an
of us
official.
talking or
Yeah,
what.
yeah. Just clarify.
So yeah. So Lanfear mentions the Sakarnan, and she says that it's for women, which in my opinion is either she's misunderstanding it, like her in-world knowledge is wrong, or they're making that change because her mind is that Rand can use Calendor while she uses the Sakarnan, and then them together can release her from her oaths to the Dark One. That seems to be like her plan or her idea of what would work.
Okay.
And I don't know how that's going to shake out. It's just if it's a change, it's an interesting change, and we'll just see how it goes. Or maybe she has a misunderstanding, and then this plan is a little bit wrong from the start, which I think both could be entertaining. You know, if she's heading down a wrong path with bad information, what's it going to be like when she finally figures it out, or things go wrong? So we'll just have to see. I think the concept that they're introducing is crazy. It's pretty cool. Yeah. She's like, I'm releasing herself from her oaths. They're both going to grab the strongest Sangreals, technically second strongest, but okay, where they're just gonna be walking nukes hand in hand together, just going in people's dreams and killing them. Like, I mean,
See,
this could go completely off the rails.
It's funny because Lanfear is the one that's giving all this information. I think in her mind, she plans on using those Sangreals with Rand But in my head, if they are being used to defeat the Dark One, while she thinks it's going to be her and Rand trying to free her, I think it's going to end up being Egwene and Rand using the Sangreal and the Sangreals together. Again, just
Ooh.
I'm the parallelogram here. I like making parallels this episode.
Parallelogram.
That was good.
That should be your title. Like instead of David on the thing, it
The
should say the
parallelogram?
parallelogram.
Nah,
We've got
I'm child tall all day.
I was gonna say we've got David, we've got Landson, we've got Child Tall, and we've got the parallelogram.
Let's go.
Oh my god! And that's perfect that we talked about that because my note here literally says, "Do you believe her?" So
I do. I think I do believe her. From honestly what we've seen, while she is a Forsaken, she hasn't really done anything that's led me to believe that she would do. Like, she prioritizes Rand / Lews Therin over everything else in my head.
Mm-hmm. And so, Paul, you're on the other side where you think there's partial manipulation, or you're kind of split.
I'm like definitely split right now. I'm not leaning towards one side or the other. I will say though, if she was telling the truth when she said that Rand pulled her into the dream that time and not the other way around, I would lean more towards she's telling the truth and she wants to, free herself of her dark oaths. And I'm always recruiting, right? I'd love to have her on the crew, bring her on the good side. So I
For
want
sure.
her.
What do you mean?
to
She
come
is the good
over.
side. What do you mean? You want
Yeah.
Rand to come to the good side? You mean?
Oh, okay. There we go.
are you putting that on the board, Paul? That we're recruiting Lanfear eventually?
I
don't want to.
If I have to pick one or the other, yes, I would say we're recruiting her to the good side.
I don't want to pressure you, but you're falling behind a little bit in the amount of theories that
The
are being
theories.
put on the board. I don't think. I
I
think
know.
technically quality will win the day at the end, but Dave is throwing lots of darts, and so some of those
Gonna hit
might flip
some.
green instead of flipping red. Yeah.
What was the one that I had requested you put to the very bottom? Let's bring it out
Like
right
Gabriel was a Forsaken.
now. Oh my!
Oh, wow.
That's
You
actually
took away
hilarious.
credit from yourself by
I was like,
when you were saying that live. I was
Oh.
looking at Kyle to see if I can get a reaction from him because you just started off so strong and you kept trying to hedge your bet and just
Yeah,
be
I
like,
was hedging
well,
too
like
much.
I don't actually think that.
I hedged too much.
Flip your
I
list
cashed out way
upside
too
down.
early. I made $3 to the $5 that I put in.
Yeah,
That's so
That's so
funny.
funny.
Okay. I think we can move into this final scene here, which, in my opinion, is a very controversial scene. And I saw some people have some takes on it. Not sure entirely where I fall, but this is the sweat tent. I think we've really captured the Aiel culture part of it. So we've talked about the clan chiefs, the wise ones. I will say that the sweat tent as a concept is very cool in the book. It's very important to the culture. It creates this situation where we have to have conversations. Water is limited, so they use the limited water to make steam to make them sweat. That's how they bathe, essentially. So
blah.
I like that. And then the big part here is we have this awkward-ish interaction between this woman and Lan and Moraine, and it was funny at first where it's like, who's she checking out? She's looking at you.
Right.
She's looking at you, and then they have a conversation, but then we get the truth of it that it's Lan. And there's some weird parts, there's some funny parts. Just kind of curious where people landed here.
I guess let's give me the recap in terms of Lan basically sees someone with a tattoo. That tattoo is associated with his family name, or at least the symbol is. He asks her, "What are you doing with that?" She basically exclaims that you are still our king. The place that they're from, Malkier, while it is physically destroyed, it still lives on through Lan, and she's just trying to remind him of his duties, I guess, as king.
Mm-hmm. But I mean,
That
you pretty much
was it?
have it. The
Okay.
Malkier, we saw the remnants of Malkier 2 all the way back in the finale of season 1. Like the blight just overtook it, and Lan was like young when his whole family got murdered, and basically everybody died. Right? Tell me, is this controversial because this is all made up?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Because
Oh.
I was very confused at what was going on here too, and I could see why this would piss off some book cloaks. Are you pissed off, Kyle?
It's
'Cause I
too
don't
early. I
love
think it's too early in the process to be pissed off. I am
Yeah.
confused. The
Sure.
idea of like the golden crane is something that I would maybe triggers him, and this conversation like that you just explained it all, Luke. That's very real. That is established lore that occurs.
Mhm.
It's just the way it's happening, the vehicle of it. It just feels forced.
I disliked it for what it's worth. This was probably my least favorite part of the
Yeah.
change.
And then the
Yeah.
second part of the controversy that people were, maybe some people were upset, was the insinuation that Moraine and Swan are, the relationship is broken up enough that Lan is like, yo, go bang that chick, basically. And people were like, yo, bro, like, you're just going to turn your back. Lan, this big, you're going to turn your back on Swan.
I didn't like that either, to be
Yeah,
honest.
your Aes Sedai's lover of however many years. And people were, I liked the angle, like the kind of exploration of like, you deserve to be happy. Like, it's okay to let your hair down for a little bit. Like, we're on this insane journey, but you know, don't burn yourself out. But I think that the way it all came across, that got watered down from the idea of Moraine banging a chick with Lan's encouragement. Yeah.
My question was going to be, I can, even as a non-book reader, I can see why this would be kind of annoying, because at least from a show watchers only perspective, it's weird that we would have someone with Lan's like
Heritage,
understanding of
call it.
heritage,
Yeah.
and we find them now in the Aiel Waste with the Aiel. Like, how did this person get here? Why are the Aiel?
She said
Did she
was
explain
just a
it?
girl. Yeah, she was just a girl when the blight hit. And so she abandoned the kingdom. She ran away. A wise one found her and then kind of took her into the Aiel. And that's how she
Okay.
got there. And Lan was confused because he was like, Aiel don't have tattoos. Like, where'd you come from?
Okay.
Which is also confusing because did she get that tattoo when she was just a girl? Like, all on her back? So
She must have. I mean, if it's related to Lan's heritage, then she probably would have got it when she was young and just has carried it. It definitely threw me off. I was not expecting to get Lan's storyline out here in the Aiel Waste. I'm always going to be curious of Daddy Lan's storyline, though, and
And
where
let
it goes,
let me add, just maybe this will make you feel 1% better, not too much, but where Land's city or whatever, where Land's from is kind of close to the spine, so it's not like that far compared to, you know, if he was in Falm or something like that.
I
So
remember
it's,
from the map you showed me, I know, I'm assuming, yeah, we're way more north than we are Tyr, obviously, like that gap between there, and yeah, so I
and
guess
they're
it does
east
make
of the
sense.
spine, so it's like it's kind of there. I don't know.
I guess I just forgot that she did give her backstory on how she got there, so that was my complaint. But now that Paul reminded me of it, I'm fine. It's good.
Yeah, a few comments on these last scenes here when Moraine's talking to Bear and the other woman who is just the worst. She calls Moraine a child, and I'm like, yo, relax a little bit. Like, but Moraine asks like, what happens when the men become clan chiefs? I'm sorry. She asks what happens when Rand does become Kara Cairn, and she doesn't answer. So the prophecy seems like it's almost a bad thing. Like a lot of the IU will die, but fighting for him. So in the end, a few of them will be saved. It kind of seemed like that's where they were going, but it also seems like a very touchy subject that they don't like talking about. And then just to wrap up with this one, her name was Melindra. I don't know how important she's going to be, but that was the name that she gave. She gave a really solid line where it was like, I would break my spears and follow you back into the blight to take back home. That was cool. Just talking about breaking the spears, you know, leaving the IO life behind. But then she also refers to, you know, as long as one man wears the Hadori and one woman wears the Kisane, Malkier lives. Is the Hadori, is that the sword or the headband that he wears?
Headband.
The headband? Okay, that's what I thought. And then I don't think we know anything about the Kisane yet, do we?
We do
Okay.
not.
So
No.
that's something else to look out for then. Like, didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, this will be good in the sense that, like you're saying, Paul, you're latching onto these terms, these concepts. We're getting reminded about Malkier and all these things. We're just going to have to keep an eye on how it actually culminates and figures itself out. That's really it for me in terms of breakdown, coverage, so on and so forth. I will say that Moraine and Nynaeve have kind of been stuffed in the trunk a little bit this season. It feels like after episode 1. So we'll see what ends up happening as we move forward. Moraine is getting more integrated, let's say, with maybe she's butting heads with these wise ones. What's going to come of that? Nynaeve is barreling towards this conflict potentially in Tanchico. We know that the block of why she can't channel is always in the back of her mind. It's in the back of our mind. So I think I'm really keeping an eye on those storylines. Wheel of Time, famous for all of these characters. We're juggling all of this over 8 episodes. Naturally, it's going to be an ebb and a flow across the season, but we've been killing it with so many characters, and we've been killing it so hard that it almost seems more obvious in comparison of the way that Nynaeve and Moraine have taken a little bit of a backseat. So we'll just have to see what happens there.
And my last piece before we get into MVP, LVP is just that I can't decide what my favorite episode of the season is, but I will say I have never felt as positive about Wheel of Time, the show, as I do right now. Not even because, like I said, I don't know if this was my favorite episode, but the back to back to back of how high quality and how much I enjoyed these first 3 of season 3 is just making me feel just peak fandom for the show right now. And it's incredible.
All right. So if I'm not mistaken, we decided last episode that I get to go first. So,
Paul's last.
Paul, before I go, I got a question for you. Did you notice or keep track of how often you went first in MVP, LVP last season?
No, but I'm sure I was very anxious to get my pick in first, and I was like, I'll go.
So anxious that you were 6 out of the 8 times.
Yeah.
That is impressive. I mean, I'll go first here if you guys want. I'll give him that.
No, I'm stepping in here. So my MVP is going to be Ravin, aka Lord Gabriel. Stole the opening for me. I just thought it was so great, and he's winning right now. It feels like he's got more gays on his arm. Everyone believes him, that they love him. He's also potentially working the back door with Mo Gideon. He's also in contact with Grandel and Semerhag. He was the one that brought them up. So he's got irons in the fire. You can see that plans are moving around for him. And then LVP, I'm going to say, man, I was going to say Leandrin,
it's tough,
but that one's tough because she actually got some revenge in her mind and she kind of won in a sense. So I'm going to say, unfortunately, Liana, only because she's walking around like she's the big dog and that she's wielding this power as the keeper of the chronicle when she's not realizing that Elida is actually stealing her lunch money, it seems like, at this moment, and connected to that being Swan as well. So yeah,
That's good.
whatever, pride come before the fall, whatever they say, that feels like what we might be watching here with Liana. Love her though.
Me next?
Yeah, we'll go with Luke.
I will take the easy MVP and I will go with Matrim Cauthon because he has the scene, and I just love this guy so much. I think he's grown on me in the show way quicker than he grew on me in the books, and that's a weird take. I don't know. Some people agree, some people disagree with that about that, but he's a badass, and I love when he uses the quarterstaff. But my LVP was gonna be Liana, but I'm gonna actually pick Swan because for very similar reasons. She got played by Elida, and she actually wasn't even in this episode. So yeah, that's it. Dave?
All righty. MVP for me. We'll give it to Perrin. Obviously, had a very good storyline this episode. A lot of character growth for him, coming into his own as a leader, and his story is obviously one that I'm very interested in to see where it ends up going. And then for the LVP, we will go with Varen because, like we said earlier, she was on good standing with us, and now she's kind of making herself out to be a villain a little bit. So the flags being raised there are making her my LVP.
MVP, I kind of want to split it between Elaine and Nynaeve just because they did wade through that Black Aja bullshit and they were onto something and they seem to be on track. So good for them. They seem like one of the few ones that like made progress this
The
episode.
Hounds. Give it to the
Yeah,
Hounds.
the Hounds, Swan's Hounds.
Mhm.
And then LVP, I don't know her name, but the Aiel woman who was in the tribe and she was yelling at them, no time to bury these people. It's their fault. They're dead. Let's go home to Ruidine. And then also in the sweat tent, she's calling Moraine, like, don't you have any manners? Don't they teach you politeness in that tower, child? And I'm like, dude, pull it in a little bit. You're talking to Moraine right now. So LVP for sure for that lady.
It's a good one.
I'll give you another mnemonic device, I guess. I used that so confidently the first time, and ever since I've kind of been questioning if I used it right. But for the Aiel, it's clans. So how about the Aiel culture and society is just a constant clash of clans?
Mm.
Clash of Clans. I can remember that.
Yeah, you like
Clash
that
of
one, Paul?
Tribes. I can remember that. Clash of Tribes.
Whatever,
No,
dude. The tribe is
Well, that's-
spoken. You're not on the episode next
Tri-
week. How about that?
Tribes of Midgard.
Oh shit, I didn't even think about that one. Okay. That'll be episode 3. Wow, I'm a poet. And I really liked this episode. I thought it was great when I had a blast covering right there. Paul, it's great to have you here. I'm excited for the 4 of us going forward. I'm looking at this recording and it says 2 hours and 3 minutes, but we're going to trim that down below 2. You in the future, currently if I'm lying or not, but I'm not a liar. So I know we're below 2 hours. But we're going to get the hell out of here. So I'm going to keep it quick here. We're covering a lot of TV right now. I'm sure you're loving the Wheel of Time. Best way to support the Wheel of Time coverage is to subscribe on Binge Empire or on YouTube. And then if you want to do all the other things we're covering, Severance is about to wrap up. Invincible is wrapping up. Solo Leveling is wrapping up. The White Lotus, Yellow Jackets. Oh my God, all these shows I'm sure you're watching and loving. Well, we're covering them too. So check out The Core is our Apple TV podcast. Dark and Twisted is our Dark and Twisted Yellow Jackets podcast and White Lotus. And then Final Form is our anime and animation podcast, which will be Solo Leveling, which will be Invincible. And if you want to chat with us, or you want to correct me in a little bit more of a private manner so you don't hurt my feelings, the Discord. If you want to hang and chat with us, join the Discord. The link should be in the description of this episode. And we're finally through the first 3 episodes. We tanked all of this coverage. Proud of us. For the final time this week, we are Binge Empire, and thank you so much for listening.